Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soul Seekers podcast, where we believe that hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure as we share our mission of mentorship is conservation. To learn more about everything we do, check out our show on Carbon TV or go to soulseekersnation.com. Freedom on, everybody, and stay soulful. This podcast is also proudly brought to you by Onyx Hunt. When I first got into hunting, I kept hearing all about public land and different access and how to find different locations to hunt. I was like, well, how are people even identifying all this stuff? Well, sure enough, I came across the number one hunting GPS app, and that is Onyx Hunt. If you guys want to get better at hunting and go deeper into your scouting, Onyx Hunt is the number one GPS app for that. Join the millions of hunters who trust Onyx Hunt to find more game, discover new access, and hunt smarter. It was a game changer for me, and I know it's going to be a game changer for you if you've never used it. If you have used it, you know the power that it holds. Guys, I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you want to know more about Onyx, go to onyxmaps.com/hunt and check out their app. Be blessed, freedom on, and stay soulful. All right, guys, if you're in the market for a new hunting rifle this coming year, look no further than a Kelbley's rifle. I've been rocking their Coda rifle for the last couple seasons, and I've had great success with it. It's an amazing shooter, and every time I put one of their rifles in somebody's hands, they're like, oh, I got to get one of these. Kelbley's holds over 92 world and national records that are either broken or set on one of their actions or rifles. So they really set a higher level of accuracy. If you want to know more about Kelbley's rifles, go to kelbley.com. That's KELBLY.com. Tell them Johnny Mack sent you with Soul Seekers, and go enjoy shooting that much more in this coming hunting season. Be blessed, everybody. Go check out Kelbley Rifles. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soul Seekers podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack. Today, I'm joined by Matt Schmitz, the owner of Inferno Archery and multiple champion archer. We're going to be talking all about what kind of gear you should get if you want to get into archery hunting. Also, whether just archery and the details and specifics of you can actually have an archery setup for elk hunting. You can have an archery setup for deer hunting. We're going to cover bows, new versus old, low entry level models versus higher level models, and arrows, rests, releases, sights, all that in this podcast. So without further ado, the man of the hour, Mr. Matt Schmitz. How you doing, brother?
Doing great, Johnny. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, it's a great time. By the way, all you listeners out there, this is also an Instagram Live, so we're going to have a lot of people asking questions live as we are recording this. So already somebody said, what kind of gear should I get? Perfect question for this podcast. I love it. Matt, real quick, how long have you been archery hunting? Or shooting a bow, I guess, more importantly.
Shooting a bow. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't until after I got out of college that I jumped into shooting bows. I really just got frustrated on the rifle hunting side, and I wanted to just try something different. So I got into shooting my bow. So 2003 was my first official year just shooting a bow for hunting. And then in 2006, I believe, was my first year competing. So however many years that is, it's over 20, I guess.
I love
Back when the gear was new, but not all that different, but it's certainly come a long ways.
Well, we're going to be talking about that here because you are the man with a bow shop, so you're going to be able to dial us in on all that. Just a real quick shout out to Matt and his archery choices. He was the one who got me hooked up with my very first bow. I asked around. I was like, hey, who do I go to get set up for a bow? And everyone was like, you got to go see Matt Schmitz at Inferno Archery out of Aberdeen, Washington. And I was like, hey, Matt, I shoot guns. I'm familiar with the importance of triggers, sights, quality gear. I want to have something to last. I'm a buy once, cry once kind of guy. Set me up exactly with what you would be running. And so Matty hooked me up with well, it's not even a model that they push anymore, but a PSE Stealth Carbon Air back when that came out, and I've been shooting it ever since. Had my first issue this year with the rest that was put on. We'll talk about that because that's going to be a big topic when it comes to gear failing, when it comes to archery stuff. But other than that, been a great bow. This elk up behind me was my first elk, and took it with this bow
Hmm.
and this arrow setup, and so we'll be diving into that. Um, Matt, you are the man, and as much as I have questions for you, um, the first one I have is when someone wants to get into archery, where would you point them?
Well, they got the best way is to get into the shop. But once we're here, I can show them what I have. Really start to wonder a lot of things. If it's an experienced hunter, you kind of want to know what their price range is. If it's a brand new shooter, maybe they don't want to go big and buy something that's going to cost $3,000. So really, you gauge budget, experience, um, where they want to go with it, and then we can start to formulate some conclusions about what they want to get.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
What is the pro of going entry level model versus I'm just going and buying big and I'm gonna go get the nicest newest bow out there?
Yeah, entry level's good for certain kinds of people. They're the ones that think that bow hunting might be something that they want to do, and but they don't want to spend a whole lot of money. So you see a lot of people looking for maybe a used bow that fits them out of the shop here and do consignment bows. So usually got a rack of used bows back there. But if you're just not really sure if you're going to like it, it's a good time to go to an entry level bow. And so you're going to spend anywhere from 500 to about $800 on a bow, maybe a little bit more when it comes to all the accessories and the setup and everything. But usually I have a little bargain bin over here that old used accessories that I can bolt things on and make it affordable for everybody else too.
Hmm.
So that would be that exploratory level person that's just trying to figure out if they like to do it or not.
Yeah.
That would be the benefit is you're not fully committed. You're not thousands of dollars in it like you would be that buy once cry once rifle that you might do.
Yeah. Is there a benefit to do you get more bang for your buck with a higher price archery gear and equipment, or does it really just come down to you as a shooter? You have Ruger American rifles that are box rifles that shoot pretty good, but plastic stock, or it doesn't have the ergonomics that you might enjoy out of a custom rifle or a really high end, Kelbley's rifle or something like that. What is the benefit of a higher end model?
Well, you do get what you pay for. And initially, a brand new shooter is not going to outshoot any bow. They're going to have all kinds of form things that they're going to try to learn how to do from setup and execution and consistency. And if they spent $5,000 and they don't know what they're doing, they're slapping triggers and can't get on target. It doesn't matter how much money they're going to spend. They're not going to get any better than what their skill set is.
Mm. So when you're talking about outshooting a bow, what does that mean?
Well, really, what that comes down to is when you've been hunting for long enough and shooting long enough, and that you've shot endless arrows and you've mastered your skill to where you're now shooting correct form, almost 10 out of 10 shots. And just using an example, maybe like an 80-yard shot where you're putting everything essentially in a 4-inch group, 5-inch group, something of that nature.
Hmm.
If you can do that consistently, you're going to start to understand the differences in a $500 bow versus a $2,000 bow.
Mm.
And it's not until that point that once you get that skill set there that you're really going to notice those little details and what makes a bow better.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Um, what are some of the benefits of a higher end bow? So when it comes to a
Yep.
rifle, which I'm very familiar with, you get an upgraded trigger, the ergonomics are better, the action is smoother, the tolerances are tighter,
Hmm.
so your groupings are going to be smaller. What are really the benefits to an upgraded bow?
And that just like you said, like the gun is a full package. It's got the trigger and everything already in it, right? Where archery has accessories. And so before you get a bow and you want to do you know, good things with your bow. You got to learn how to execute clean shots, like your trigger on your rifles. You're going to have good accessories that can allow you to do those kind of things. But let's just say that you've got, you know, Carter like mics and the best of the best accessories when it comes to sights and rests and stabilizers and releases. Then you get into the bow, and really what you're paying for a lot of times is, you know, there's a high end level, which would be the carbons, and you almost have the same bow when it comes to an aluminum riser bow, same cam, same geometry. The bigger difference there is that, you know what, if you're a backcountry hunter and you want to carry something light like what you have a
Mm-hmm.
carbon bow, you're going to shave almost a pound off.
Mm.
And sometimes that 1 pound, just like in backpacking and everything, is lighter is always more expensive.
Yeah.
And so you're going to go ahead and tack another, you know, $700 onto that, $600 onto that, depending on the version, from going from an aluminum to a carbon riser. So you're going to get the most tunable bows with the most tunable cam systems. You're going to get something light. You're going to have very good tolerances in your limb pockets. You're going to get quality set of strings compared to maybe a low end bow where they give you a set of strings that's not very good, that you have to put a bungee on because the peak twists around. You're going to get a decent set of strings right off the bat, and that might be good for a year. But you can also upgrade those to, you know, a good quality string like a gas, you know, and that's going to be good for consistency too. But you're going to get higher speeds. You're going to get all those things that I was saying, and also you're going to look cooler than all your buddies that aren't doing that.
Ain't that the truth? Hey, just real quick, I want to address this for the people who are going to listen to this podcast that are like, what's a riser? Do you want to answer that real quick?
Oh yeah, you know, the riser is basically the handle of the bow. I'll grab a bow real quick.
For all of you here on Instagram Live, feel free to drop your questions as we go along, or tune in, because even if you're not going to be sticking around for the IG Live for the questions to get answered, we might be covering it throughout the podcast. And so um, go ahead and drop those. All right, Schmitty, all
Oh yeah, you
yours.
got your bow right there too.
Yeah.
All right, so this is the PSE Mach 33, the 2025 version. You probably have about the 2016 version roughly. I can't remember, but I know that it was the second gen of PSE's carbon bows. So scaling back a little bit, the riser right where I'm holding extends right here from the limb pocket to the limb pocket and everywhere in between. Uh, that would be the riser. These pieces are the limbs. And I know that we have some brand new listeners. We got some people that are like, yeah, I've heard this a million times.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that'd be the riser there.
Okay.
The difference is some of these bows behind me, they're machined aluminum, where this is a carbon bow.
Awesome. Awesome. That's a great definition. It took me a long time to actually, I had to Google it one time. I was like, what's a riser? Even after I had my bow,
Mhm.
because I just knew I wanted to bow hunt. I was like, I didn't know the anatomy of a bow that well. So great explanation. All right. So we talked about the getting what you pay for, the bang for the buck. Entry level bow, higher level bow. Higher level bows are typically lighter. You're going to get better strings on them. And better strings mean what? Lasting longer? Is that what better strings mean?
Cons- uh, that's all relative. When it comes to lasting longer, it's wear and tear and damage and amount of shots that you're taking. What you usually get when you're getting a good string is, one, your peep sight's going to track, so that annoying twisting that has to happen doesn't really happen. The center servings rarely move. All the servings done nice and tight. You can get customized colors to match up your arrow selection nice, you know, and just make everything look the same. But what you're really getting is no stretch, faster strings, consistency day to day. Where a long time ago, when I first started doing this, my bow shot completely different from morning to evening, if it was hot or if it was cold, and I chase it all around. And even if you took a practice shot in the morning, you wouldn't know for sure that it would be where it needed to be when temperatures changed or the evening came around.
Yeah.
So yeah, just yeah, strings are arguably one of the most important accessories that somebody can put on a bow.
And then this might be getting ahead of myself real quick, but I bought my bow in, I think, 2000. I got it from you in 2018.
Okay.
And
Yep.
I've never changed out my strings. Is that a bad thing? How often do I need to now listen, this was my first bow. I am a newer archery hunter per se. I've taken some animals. I can consistently shoot accurately. You and I have shot together. So um,
Mhm.
but like how often should somebody expect to switch out strings?
It really depends on the use, right? Normally, I personally change out if I'm going to keep the same bow year to year, and I have kept the same elk bow for year to year for the last maybe 4 years. I probably put three sets of strings on them. Not always because they were just worn out. It was because I stepped on it when I was elk hunting and I broke a whole bunch of strands. But let's say outside of damage that you're going to have, uh, usually every 2 years is a good idea if you shoot year round.
Yeah.
If you shoot a whole bunch, 1 year is probably better if you shoot a lot of arrows. I'm talking, you're that guy that goes in the backyard and shoots arrows until it gets dark and you're 5 days a week. And then every year would be a good idea for that. But there are times where guys just hang it up, leave it alone. And then, at times they can probably last 3 or 4 years. I've had strings on a long time that have been very, very dependable like yours. But you'll start to see degradation. The wear and tear pieces are going to be the center serving where your D loop hooks up. That's always going to shift and change.
Hmm.
The roller guard's going to eventually chew some things. The end servings are always going to get worn and separated a little bit, and it's almost more cost effective just get new strings because yeah, I can take that out, take all your strings apart, and reserve everything. But by the end that I'm doing all my labor, you might as well just got a new set of strings put on there
Interesting. Okay,
because
I'm
they are time consuming.
yeah, I'm definitely due for new strings then hearing you say that because I'm not a guy that just hangs my bow up and shoots every once in a while. I shoot it consistently and
Mhm.
I've had to constantly adjust my sights because my arrow starts shifting when my strings loosen up or all that. So,
Yeah.
um, really good info. Okay, so Schmitty, we talked a little bit about entry level versus higher end models. What would be take me and take us, the listeners, through what you would talk through somebody who's shopping for a bow?
Yeah. Should I use you as an example that's already been in the game or somebody brand new?
Use let's go somebody who's been in the game because and if you can parallel that with what you would say to somebody who's brand new. I know they're like two different conversations, but if we
Mhm.
can kind of merge those a little bit.
Right. Yeah, we've already kind of discussed that person that's just exploratory and trying to get into the sport. And that's that. Let's try to get you out the door 100% of everything, 800 to $1,000, and then you're out. And then you know what? You can sell your bow next year if you didn't like it. I had a couple of those happen this year where guys just didn't hunt with them, and then I'm buying the bow back from them. But as an example, so you've been in the game. I know that you're a committed hunter and you would qualify as kind of my normal guy that's going to come in here and shop for a high end bow because you've had the same one for years. You kind of wonder what's changed, what is it worth on the upgrade. I already got a carbon bow, it already shoots about the same speed, weighs about the same amount, and technology changes a lot. So if we're going to use, let's just pretend that your bow walked into my shop with you in here and I don't know who you are. We would look at the bow and we'd say, wow, that's 10 years old roughly, and a lot of things have changed. I would say, are you looking to spend the same amount of money, try to get a $2,000 bow, swap out accessories and whatnot, and just figure out what that price range is that they want to shop in. And if they're going to say, "Yep, I'm going to be happy with spending whatever I want, buy once, cry once," then the next question would be, what kind of ground are you hunting? Are you doing backcountry? Are you doing tree stand? Are you doing ground blind? Does weight matter to you? Because now my brain's starting to think, if they hunt like I do, they're going to probably want to spend that 500 extra dollars, 600 extra dollars to cut a pound. That's going to be important.
Hmm.
If they don't do a whole lot of that hiking and they don't mind having an extra pound on the bow, then maybe we'll talk about an aluminum riser bow that has all the same qualities about tuning and accuracy and tolerances and everything. And so then they'll kind of guide me through that direction. One of the other things that kind of come up too is somebody might come up and say, you know what, I thought the bow was great. I didn't get very much penetration on this bull. I lost this bull. My sight picture was really wiggly. Man, I couldn't tune my broadheads. And now that's starting to make me say, oh, okay, so you're probably going to need, I'll check their bow, see how fast it is. Maybe it's a 310 feet per second bow, where a lot of these PSEs that we're running can be anywhere from 330 to 340 feet per second. And they have incredible tuning characteristics that we can get them into shooting good. So
Hmm.
kind of leaning into why they want to do that, and then I'll feel them out and see which way they want to go with high end.
Okay.
And so
Uh, S-
my Mhm.
Scotty Steed said just experimenting. So like, okay, so you're filling them out. You got somebody who has a bow already, so they already know how to shoot. Uh, but beyond price point, because price point is the ultimate. It seems like nowadays. Someone said, "I want to be able to hunt deer this fall," and you said, "Okay, well, what's your budget?" And they're like, "Well, I'm not sure if it's going to be something I like." Um, Set me up for that. Set me up for success, and then we'll figure out the budget from there.
Right. If they're just going to come in deer hunting, usually if it's local out here, they're not going to be doing a whole lot of, 200, 2,000 foot elevation climbs and going too far away. So you can already say that they're probably not going to need a carbon. They're probably not going to need the fastest bow on the market. So they can pick a whole bunch of bows. If he's just coming in saying, I'm just trying to get in for deer, then you've got a lot of options when it comes to just getting started, maybe on a stinger low level, or you're going to go next one up and get a drive, and then the price points are extremely low.
And
Um,
when you're sorry to interrupt just for a second, when you're mentioning those names, is that a certain brand that you're recommending
yeah,
right there?
primarily I'm going to be talking about PSE.
Okay.
My shop carries PSE and Bowtech. We can do Darton, but primarily I do PSE. So when I'm naming these brands, yeah, they're pretty much all PSE brands.
Okay, good. So sorry to interrupt, but that was important to make sure so
No
people
worries.
people aren't being like, "Oh, who makes this bow or whatever." So you said Stinger is first low end and then what?
hmm Yeah, stingers down low, you're gonna get not very good strings. You're gonna have to. It's not gonna be a great bow, but it gets you out hunting, and a lot of people can kill animals with the stinger.
Yeah.
Not saying that there's anything wrong with it, but I'm gonna have a few frustrations with tuning it. I'm gonna have a few frustrations with getting the peep right, and if I'm having frustrations in my shop, they're gonna have frustrations in the field when it matters.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, and then
Yep.
next step after that would be for you.
The drive's running about 750 to $800, the 2025 models.
Yeah.
You get good strings with those, the same strings that you get with the Mach 34s, 30s, 35s, any of the high end bows, the evolves. And so you're really getting a very good bow there. So that's one of my highest selling bows, because it's very hard for me to say, yeah, you should probably spend another $1,100 for 15 feet per second more,
Uh huh.
a little bit of looks, and so that one is that perfect bow for so many people. And but then if they want a little bit faster bow, and a little bit of a cam change, a difference in the cam, because we're running the EC2 cams with the 220 system. What that means is the 220 system is where my world has changed when it comes to being able to set guys up that might have bad form, that are having issues with their broadheads. And instead of pulling pins and dropping washers everywhere, I can pull something out in 10 seconds, and we're shooting a whole nother bullet hole and not having to
Mm,
lose washers on the floor and count them and everything. So
okay.
it makes my world a whole lot easier. And if it makes my world easier, their world's going to be a whole lot better when it comes to broadhead season,
Okay.
which is a whole nother category, because that's when everybody thinks everything's good, and then they throw on broadheads and it's not good.
Which we'll talk about coming up. Okay, so you're talking about the pros and cons of bows and what you get out of them. After somebody says, "Okay, I want this bow," what's the next accessory that you point them to?
Yep. So then we if they're willing to spend the money and get good stuff, which most everybody is that's trying to get a good bow, I preach big into release has got to be one of your first accessories that you want to get a good release. Some people cut corners on that, and the quality of the trigger is low, so it's going to give you that feeling that it's creeping, clicking, and then you're anticipating the shot and things go bad. Like 2-pound triggers that you use hunting. You remember all the old ones
Oh yeah.
that click, 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 fire, and then you pull the gun so far to the side. It's going to cause a lot of bad habits. Don't matter what kind of gun you're shooting. So I prefer any kind of trigger that has zero movement and is stiff enough that you can get your finger on it.
Mm-hmm.
So a good release is going to build a good foundation from there. You could almost get any accessory that you want, but if we're going to be using you as kind of my example customer, you're going to be looking at what I mostly carry are when we come into rests. There's a whole lot of theories. Yep, you still got the old like Mike. Is that the original?
This is the second one that I got from you because the first
The
one.
like Mike 2. No, that's
No,
is that the
not the
like
two.
Mike
It's the
2?
first one.
Oh, that's the good one. Don't ever get rid of that. They stopped making that. I had to get Carter to find me pieces and parts in their drawers, and they built me enough of them that I don't have to worry about it again.
I got two thanks to you, but I broke off the little nub, the trigger part.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah. Just saw off an arrow and put it over it. That's what I do with all mine anyway. Gives you that rounded feel on there. A little customization, but it fits good into the crease of the finger.
perfect.
But as far as rests go, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that are big into limb-driven rests, and then there's people that are big into the cable-driven rests. And I've shot them both, and I cannot tell the difference in accuracy from a limb-driven, which would be the string comes from maybe the limb. They're already, and when you draw, they relax, and the arrow comes up and goes. What I don't like about that is you got string this long, and where I hunt, it's very very brushy, and you're going to get things potentially caught.
Yeah.
One of the issues that I also see in that is there's constant stretching and retuning that you have to do. You'll look at the arrow rest in the down position where it should be, and by the end of your session, it's already starting to creep up. Yes, that can be mitigated in the field or anytime, but my thought is, when it comes to elk hunting, I like dependability. Nobody wants anything to fail, and so I think that just a dependable setup, rock solid, like a lever action 30-30 mindset, where everything is very simple and it's going to work in crunch time. I like to base everything around that, because if somebody can shoot a half an inch better group at 80 yards in optimal conditions, they don't need that half an inch when things hit the fan and it's time just to make everything work.
Mm-hmm.
So what I sell the most of are the QAD versions, whether the HDXs or the micro adjust ones, but they're cable driven and they're rock solid. They don't stretch. And if you tune them right, they drop correctly, they tune correctly. And I go back and forth and test them from time to time. I got one on a bow. I can never find the difference, but I do have to retune my other one, and I never have to retune my QAD HDXs.
Okay, that's good to know.
And
Go ahead because I got something to say about the QAD HDX.
yeah, I know. So you said that it wasn't you had an issue with it.
Yeah, so this last hunting season, been shooting my bow all summer, daily reps.
Hmm.
2 days before archery season kicked off, and I had a big buck on camera that I was really, and I knew he'd disappear like within the first couple days. So I had to be out there. My release, or not my release, the trigger on the rest went gritty, and the rest got stuck up and wouldn't drop, and it had something to do with the
Hmm.
internal spring. Now, what I didn't know is that QAD has a lifetime warranty, which is super awesome, and
Hmm.
they'll help you out on that. So I sent mine in, they repaired it, sent it back. But the issue was is that I had to have a rest on my bow for hunting season
Right
and
now. Yep.
right now. And things always
Hmm.
happen in archery. So all you guys who are getting into archery, be prepared for something to go wrong the week of archery season kickoff. Your
Yeah.
bow's not tuning right, your broadheads aren't tuning right, a release issue, a
Hmm.
rest issue, all of that. But regardless, that was the very first issue I've ever had with a drop away rest. Is that something
And you've
that
had
you've
that.
experienced? I've had that for 6 years.
I super rare, 6 years. So I've had other brands that have come through the shop quite a bit, and I've gone to these QADs. The number of QADs that I've sent back and the amount of time that I've been a dealer with them, which is well over a decade, is probably less than 5. The ones that I sent 2 or 3 back was the first model left-handed QAD integrates that would not stay up left-handed, but they would right-handed.
Mm.
So just another problem with me being left-handed. I've always got the shaft when it comes to being left-handed in archery. But as far as your case goes, no, it's super rare. You've got a little bit of an older version than what they're running through now, but super rare for sure.
Mm.
And that is definitely not optimal. You don't want to shoot through that thing in the up position. So I wish you would have caught that in June, but maybe you just need to shoot your bow better or more, not better.
Oh, shots fired. Shots fired. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay,
You
well,
just blow the dust off of it and go and
yeah,
ground blind. Yeah,
it was good a
that's
couple of years
what I
ago.
do too.
I'm ready to rock.
Right where I left it.
Whisker biscuits. Like
Yep.
you see somebody shooting a whisker biscuit and you're like, oh, that's kind of an interesting thing. And then you see these drop away rests and you're like, ooh, new shiny object. Pros and cons of
Mhm.
going with the traditional whisker biscuit, which
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yep.
seems
They're
consistent.
they're yeah. I mean, if anybody doesn't know what a whisker biscuit is, it's a biscuit with whiskers and a little drop that goes into the rest. And pros, hey, it's full containment, just like all of our drop away rests are. Full containment means that you can turn your bow upside down and the arrow's not going to fall out. We used to run those trophy taker rests with just that little lizard tongue, and they'd drop off if you had any knock pinch on the D loop, and it was a nightmare. So full containment is a very big deal. Ever since that they've been doing full containment with the dropaways, the game has definitely changed. So definitely good just to have that. They tune well, but there's some things that go wrong with them. So their bristles, they're like a toothbrush in a circle with a little arrow hole through it. And there's a couple different circumferences that you have when you're shooting through those. It has to be the correct one, or else we'll just sit in this slot and not be where it needs to sit.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is when people drop it in, you can settle it down. And instead of its optimal starting position, it's sitting below that. So that means you're going to shoot a very slow arrow. It's going to go extremely low, and you're not going to hit where you're at with that. You only lose about 3 feet per second with it. I've tested it here in the shop, so the speed isn't as big of a thing. That's what everybody likes to think about when they think about the whisker biscuits, but they wear out over time. But the biggest thing for me is there's a whole lot of fletching contact. They simply cannot go through that biscuit without getting touched in the fletchings, and you'll see that they'll just start turn it into a little bit of a wave on the veins. If you were to knock that arrow upside down on a whisker biscuit, there's a bottom piece of it that's stiffer bristles than the upper pieces, and then that's kind of acts as a foundation. And so if you put it upside down, it doesn't shoot very well. So I don't see really any reason to be shooting a whisker biscuit if you're an adult that's going after animals. Now, as a kid, they're nice, they're easy. There's less motor movement when it comes to clicking everything up.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the 40-pound bows and below, they don't like any cable tension, and so they that whisker biscuit shoots well. But if you were to put a drop cable into a 20-pound bow, those cables aren't very stiff, and so that dramatically messes up the timing and everything too.
Yeah.
So whisker biscuits are great. I think that they're great for new shooters shooting a low poundage bow. But if you're going to be using a grown up bow and you're a grown up and you're shooting animals, then you should probably be getting into a drop away.
Okay. One of the questions about whisker biscuits, and I think that answer, well, you more or less spoke to it based off of what you just said. If you're hunting animals and you're grown up and you're shooting grown up type stuff, then stay away from it. However, I know down here now that I moved to Texas, it's very common for people to not shoot their bows very consistently or very often. Or you get the guy, the newbie who was like, dude, I need a bow. I don't know a bow shop. I'm going to Cabela's and I'm gonna grab a bow that has a sight or maybe it's a complete setup, but more often than not they come with whisker biscuits. Um, is there a difference when shooting one with small diameter arrows or your traditional size arrows? Does that affect anything on the whisker biscuit?
There's at least two different sizes of the hole, and there's a small diameter, normal diameter, like a 244,000 sized diameter. But when I first started, there was also the XX75 Game Getter aluminums, and that was a big old hole.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to grab that one, the arrow's just sloshing around in there, and it's not going to shoot well. So yeah, if if the hole's not the right size, you're going to have some major inconsistencies.
Okay.
And
Okay.
also, you also can't shoot the fletchings that you might want to. I'm a big believer into the AAE max with about a 3 degree offset and helical, and those are going to destroy a biscuit really quickly, like those right there. Yep. But if you're going to shoot a blazer vane, then they pass through a little bit more consistent. But all those nocks, they twist. And so if they're indexed slightly off, they're going to hit different portions of the bristles, have different pressures as they blow through the rest. So yeah, I would tell everybody just steer clear of those. Now the exception, are you guys mostly shooting 20, 30 yards all the time
Yeah.
out of your,
Yeah.
yeah. See, I could see that being okay. Out west, we traditionally take a lot further shots. I try to limit my ethical shots on elk, 60 and in. Sometimes it has to be a touch further, but I also hunt really thick brush where I can't shoot that far.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not uncommon to hear, and to each their own. There's extremely good shots. I mean, you'll see like Levi Morgan shooting these shots and taking bombs in the triple digits, and he's a good enough shooter to do that. Now, I don't know that he'd want to be doing that with a whisker biscuit.
Mm.
So he's going to want the certain arrow setup that he wants with the same rest setup that he wants, and that's going to give him better results at the end. But yeah, I mean, out west, you don't really see a whole lot of whisker biscuits, and there's a reason for it.
Okay. All right. So we talked bow. Just real quick, I want to back up real quick. Is there a difference for adult bows, female bows, or youth bows? Like anything that you want to talk about on those real quick?
Uh, you know, colors are always an option, right? Some females want a pink bow or a purple bow or everything, but most of the time, let's just say that you grab a bow that was recently canceled by PSE was the Uprising. And that was a good bow that doesn't weigh very much. The mass weight of it is extremely low. And so if you have a 14-year-old kid or, 10-year-old kid, they're pretty light. Females, they don't want to have 8 pounds hanging out front
Mm.
most of the time. And that would just be your average female and average youth shooter. So the mass weight is super important on that. But what you're also going to get is cams that don't go very long and draw, and so there's a reason for that. You're losing a lot of efficiency with design if you have a bow that can go 31 inches, but you're going to be shooting them at 22 inches. So a lot of the cams are their sweet spots are going to be in that probably 24 to 28 inch draw weight length for them. Yeah, but it's not like the Mach 30s that I have. I've sold a few of them to female archers, and they love them. I mean, they come in there with their husbands. They're like, "Oh, this is nice. This is light. I really like that one." And they're like, "Oh boy, here we go."
Yeah.
And so those, and I'm like, "Hey, you should if you want to." I try not to cause any fights with with the
Right. No.
husband and wife when they come in here, but they, youth don't have to be and females don't have to be stuck into a certain spot. I mean,
Mm.
the same bow that me and you were going to be shooting is my daughter picks it up and she likes it as far as the weight goes.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know.
Yeah.
Um, and then real quick, since we're on this topic, before we jump more back to accessories, there's like an ego contest when it comes to draw weight. Oh, dude, I draw these pound limbs. You draw,
Uh-huh. Right.
what does it matter? Like ultimately, it comes down to speed of the arrow, correct? But if someone is new to archery, do they want a lighter limb? Do they want something that's more 60? It seems like all new bows now just keep going higher and higher in poundage.
Yeah. So that's a big argument, right? So long time ago, I went hunting with Ted Nugent up in Alaska, and he was pulling a 40-pound bow or something like that. This was back in 2006, and I had an 86-pound bow, and he was telling me that that's overkill. You can shoot them wherever you want. You don't even care about angles, all that stuff. And he made a reference of a 2-year-old with a steak knife that falls on top of you is going to kill you. And I'm like, that's an interesting way to come from because he was taught from Fred Bear, and they grew up in the traditional bow era,
Hmm.
and they were getting full pass throughs with bows that are a fraction of what we're doing now. And so, and then every year people come through the shop that are young, and they're getting pass throughs through elk that are shooting a 40-pound bow and with the correct broadhead. That's probably one of the most important things when it comes to penetration. But the easy answer is shoot whatever it is that you can shoot well.
Mm.
If you can shoot a 90-pound bow well, and you can't, and your accuracy doesn't change to a 70-pound bow, then go ahead and add a little bit extra. But when it does come down to the ego, I do see it in my shop a lot where I got 2 customers right now where one guy pulls 80 and he's been shooting for his whole life. We got another one that's pretty new, and he is making unsafe draws. Fingers, he scares me. He's going to put a hole in my wall, and he can barely get it back. And that's in the shop, well rested and everything, not in the field and tired. And he wants to shoot more, and he should shoot more eventually. But
Hmm.
that guy there would be a great example of you're overbowed, and you're going to have worse results if you try to chase speed. So, they haven't developed those archery specific muscles. But, I've been shooting a long time. A lot of my friends have been shooting a long time. I personally, mine's not about ego. I have short arms. I'm a 27.5 inch draw.
Mm.
And we have Roosevelt elk where I live. They're 1,000 pounds plus out here. And I want to put everything that I can into that elk while I can draw it. So one of my tests is I'll sit flat legged on the ground, draw the bow back, and if you can basically sit in a hurdler stretch and draw the thing back, then you're probably going to be okay.
Mm.
And you're not going to be overbowed and wrestling because you do need to draw sometimes halfway, creep, 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 maybe even pause and keep going. And so you're not going to be able to just draw your bow all the time the way that you think that you're going to draw your bow. So
I learned
um,
that very quick hunting out of a ground blind on deer that are standing 8 yards away from me versus,
yeah,
an elk that, is halfway behind a tree at 40 yards working its way in on me.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
that makes
yeah.
sense because
I imagine.
I was like, "Ooh, this is a lot different than what I'm used to." And now I understand why you practice the shots that you're going to take. If you're going to shoot out of a chair, practice drawing your bow
Yeah,
out of a chair. Um,
the sitting is a game changer. Kneeling's a lot easier. Sitting's a whole other animal when it comes to drawing a bow back.
yeah, you don't have your
Your
core to
story,
work on, and
right? Yeah, your story just reminded me of my son's first turkey kill with a bow. He'd been drawn however many pounds back, just over 40 pounds back. He was young, and he was drawing it back just fine in the backyard. And we had the same thing come through here in a ground blind, and must have been 10 turkeys till all jakes came to the decoys and through those little holes in the bottom, not even out there where you're hoping to see them. Those little tiny peak holes at the bottom,
uh huh.
we could start to see one head after the next head after the next head. And he's trying to draw so slow and he gets stuck. And I had to grab his bow and his wrist to help him get the thing back. But he was boom, pulling it back no problem before. But you get the animal, you get the adrenaline, you get really tight and you're not as strong. And then you got to be whisper quiet, at that distance, and
Hmm.
or else the game's up. And I'm sure your whitetails are way cagier than a turkey at that distance because there's
Oh
no
yeah,
decoy to distract them.
right,
But
big time.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I don't know. It just shoot whatever you can well. And shot placement is key, and accuracy is key. So when it comes to just overdrawing your bow, yeah, you don't want to be the guy that's in a tree stand that talks about the story that you couldn't get your bow back and you couldn't shoot it
Right.
because you were trying to be Cameron Haynes or somebody and drawing 100 pounds or whatever he's drawing right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Great
but
to
these
know. Great to know. Also, real quick, and I want to just hammer this is the idea of let off. So once you have the bow drawn, and there's that let off is that ability to the bow wanting to go back forward and pull your hand forward. Um, it seems with higher end bows, let offs are a higher percentage, like a 90% let off. With my carbon bow, I almost feel like I have to push the string forward and you can hold it forever, versus lower end models, you have these cams that it's constantly fighting you um, forward. Is that a benefit of a higher end bow?
Well, I would say that the drives and even the stingers feel great at full draw.
Mm,
They're more gradual. There's not that big break over in that valley that you feel,
mm-hmm,
but I never feel like it's spongy or pulling me forward or and any issues now. I think that even the low end bows have come so far that you're getting a great bow. But yeah, I mean the PSEs, they come in a couple different module settings. The one that they send out of the factory is the 80, 85, and 90. And so you're probably shooting 90% let off
mm-hmm.
if you have to push the bow down physically, right? And so, yeah, I prefer myself, I shoot 80. It keeps me a little more honest. You got to work a little harder on the back end, but coming from a target shooter background, we were shooting 65% let off. We would have 32 strand cables instead of 24 strand cables. And we wanted that holding weight. If you weren't shooting 18 pounds of holding weight, you might see some problems with how you're aiming. And then you get some flyers and, but if you have 18 pounds of holding weight as a reference, the bow's pulling against you. It's keeping you honest. If you have some alignment issues, you're going to be able to feel that and see that very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
If you creep at all, you're gonna feel that immediately. So you wear yourself out a lot when you're shooting target bows or bows that are holding, 15 to 18 pounds of holding weight. These bows, they drop off to where they're 90% let off. And so my last chance scale will let you draw a 70-pound bow back, and it might say 4 pounds, 5 pounds. I mean, you're gonna pull against it a little bit more, but that sounds good, it feels good, it aims good, all those kind of things. But what it doesn't do is keep you honest. You might even creep a little bit where the cams want to roll and you're not seeing it. You've aligned wrong and you're not seeing it. But what you do see is good shot, good shot, good shot. Bam, my pin was right in the middle and I'm a foot high. I don't know why. Because you're getting punished on accuracy because uh, there's just not enough holding weight to keep you online. So the
Interesting.
more holding weight, yeah, the more hold, and I always aimed with my back arm. Everybody thinks that you're going to aim with your front arm and point the bow wherever it needs to go. But on those micro adjustments at full draw, geez, I'm dipping out the bottom. I could pull slightly down this way, oh, I'm dipping out, and you could rise up and you could see the left and right wiggle, and you have an alignment issue and you could straighten up. You don't feel that on a 90% bow.
Hmm. Interesting. You and I have never talked
Yeah.
about this, so that's really good. I mean, obviously, when I first got into the bows, I was like, "Hey, man, just set me up." Um, but now that
Yeah.
I've been shooting for a while, that makes sense. I know what you're talking about,
Mhm.
um, and that's going to be a conversation for another time that we're going to have in regards
Yeah,
to
so sometimes that information is just too much for a new shooter, though,
yeah,
because they're frustrated enough with 3 anchor points and trigger execution. So beyond that, and then they throw in a level, and their brain just wants to go, there's a level. Do I need to pay attention to level? And
right.
then you start aiming with your back arm and stuff like that, and then it's like, no, let's just not get your arm whacked, and let's have some anchor points and keep it similar.
There you go. Well, let's keep it simple. Let's move back to accessories. So we covered bow. You
Yep,
said get the best release that you can. You recommend Carter's. They're awesome. You talked about the rest. You love a string-driven drop away rest. Correct. That was the correct term.
yep,
Okay.
yep, yep. That's what I run mostly. Yep.
Okay. We covered whisker biscuits. The next thing. What's the next accessory that you're going to after that?
Yep. So I'll save the hottest topic for last. You got so stabilizers. They they all kind of have the same characteristics, right?
Yep.
There's some that are a little lighter, some a little bit heavier, some that are the best carbon, some that are just some aluminum on there. They've all got adjustable weights on the end, and so you can take that down and adjust uh, your aim based on how much weight you want to add or take off of your stabilizer. Most of the good quality stabilizers nowadays are running that, and so the debate really comes down to, are you trying to shave a little bit? Like an AAE is a more expensive uh, stabilizer. It is a little bit better carbon. Then you got a fraction of the cost if you go to a Conquest. At the end of the day, 99% of the shooters are probably not going to have any accuracy improvements if they choose one way or the other. There's bee stingers and whatnot too. So um, I wouldn't get too hung up on that. That's trust your bow shop guy and whatever they say they want. That's great. You're not going to be that much better or worse based on those two or three brands
Gotcha.
that you're running.
Okay, so real quick, first when we were talking about bows, you're like, "Hey, man, you want to save a pound? That is a big difference in the backcountry and when you're carrying your
Mm-hmm,
bow." But then I see these people adding stabilizers that it's like adding
mm-hmm,
weight. Now you want to add weight
mm-hmm.
to it, or how long do you need it to be? And can you address that?
Yeah. So that just immediately makes me think about where it does make sense to get a carbon bow because you're already a pound lighter. And it gives you the ability to, let's say you want to run a back bar or a longer front stabilizer out front, you can now put weight where you want the bow. You
Hmm.
can come to that same conclusion that I want a 7 pound bow. Well, you have a choice as to where you put your weights if you want to bracket, quick disconnects, 10-degree downs, whatever it is that you want to do. But if you get an aluminum riser bow, you don't have as much, and then you're going to turn that 7 pound bow into an 8 pound bow, as an example. So, but a lot of people, it's consistent with the rifle community too. Is there's the tournament side that's working its way into the hunting, and then the calibers that you know all about.
Yep. Yep.
Everybody wants to talk about is 6.5 Creedmoor, and but when it comes to then you're starting to see a lot of this exact same thing. You're starting to see long stabilizers and back bars, and you're starting to see that tournament mindset really come back into the hunting area.
Hmm.
And so there it's just a natural progression of everybody wants to shoot further. Every weapon's starting to shoot further. The bows are shooting further. The equipment's better. The muzzle loaders are now rifles. The rifles are now just you know, a long shooting things, right? So everything's getting better,
Yeah.
and everybody wants to keep up with that. So they're willing to put whatever on their bow that they either feel good about or actually does make a difference. And if you have some form issues or where you're losing your level all the time, yeah, you're gonna put that back bar on to kick some weight out the back or the sides to make your level come back consistently, and you're not getting that maybe that dip that you do, that 12 o'clock to
Mm.
6 o'clock dip, because you're bringing that leverage point back. So people are doing that. I personally don't run those, especially on my elk bow. I like to keep everything as light and as I possibly can.
Okay.
But I have a deer bow, and I do have a back bar on that one.
And we're gonna talk about that here coming up. You when you set me up, I think this was a 8-inch bee stinger,
Decent.
um, on
Mm-hmm.
a carbon bow. And why did you select that for my bow?
Well, I had the same bow as you at the time, and each bow does respond differently. That era of bow that I had, I basically gave you what I already tested through and knew what worked very well.
Yeah.
Uh, so I'm talking mostly on the length. But the thing that I always will do is make sure that it's a stabilizer that has adjustable weights that we can now start to customize how we aim. Where that bow and then the Stealth Mach 1, or that's a Stealth Mach 1 was the following. That bow liked a long stabilizer with a whole bunch of weight out front.
Hmm.
This new Mach 33 and Mach 30, you throw that on there and boom, your aim just drops out the bottom. So it almost shoots better with zero stabilizer versus a long. And what I would do if you had that, my bow right now, is you probably get a 6-inch stabilizer with very little weight out the front, or you would start to add a back bar to aim to hold things. steadier.
The counterbalance. The whole idea is we're teeter tottering front and back, and we want to make sure it balances to the point where when we're holding at full draw, that we're not having issues feeling like we have to lift the bow up or bring it
Mhm.
down. It just kind of sits
Right.
right out in front. That's what the stabilizer is all about.
It, Yeah, it's just super forgiving that way. You can just go through your shot sequence the way that you like to. You don't have to think that, oh man, it's going to start getting heavy and dip right at the break of my shot.
Yeah.
Now you can now you can adjust these 1 and 2 ounce weights out the front and then make those adjustments and shoot at a horizontal piece of paper.
Hmm.
And you can then see, man, I am I was dipping. I took too much off. Now I'm coming out the top. Now there's a happy medium, and then you find your sweet spot. And if you take that attention to detail into your setup and you're looking for problems like that, instead of just hoping to hit the target and have an end result, you will start to figure out what your bow truly does want. And every one of them is different.
Okay. Okay.
Each model's different.
Okay.
Model to model's different, but your bow that you have is different than the new ones
Okay. Great
as
to
far as what they like.
Great to
Yeah.
know. Before we go to the next accessory, which is the hottest topic, and I'm excited to talk about that. A couple questions that got asked on the live, real quick, and I'm assuming this might be coming from somebody who's newer into hunting. So what's the furthest shot you've taken with a bow and dispatched an animal? Um, I don't know if you even want
So
to want to say or
this reminds me of when we do pub ed at the fire department. They always ask us what our scary or what our craziest call is, and they're kindergartners,
yeah.
and we just decline to answer. I'm gonna have to decline to answer.
Fair enough. I love it.
Yeah,
Same
yeah,
same person asked, and that's Detroit 58. If I'm saying that correctly. How early before season do you start shooting broadheads?
yeah. Sooner the better. A lot of people like to get their strings on their boat. If they're going to swap things out in springtime. That way they can wear them in, shoot them in, trust them, come back for a retune, and then they're good. The sooner the better is the answer because what I don't like to see at the bow shop is July and August traditionally are our busiest months, and we want to see everybody, uh, the most amount of people that we can, do the best things that we can for them in that period of time. And when you've had 6 months to go ahead and screw on your broadheads and you don't, then you say, I got 4 days before the season, you screw on a broadhead, and my phone blows up on August 25th to September 2nd.
Yeah.
It's like, help me. Nothing's right, right? And so if there's going to be a problem, you want to find it sooner. And so my shop is probably not much different as far as the busy season with most shops. Your bow shop owner is going to appreciate you getting everything going by June. And so July's pushing it. August, you're really playing with fire. And if you're not doing it in September, by September, you might have to just throw on an expandable or go to Cabela's
Mm.
because the rest of us are going to be out hunting. But yeah, the sooner the better. And it's and I can resolve most of these things. I have good relationships with my customers. I let them know that they can text me pictures of paper tears, and I can tell them which way to move their rests. But generally, you can say that the freak out is always, oh no, they're hitting low right. Then I know what that paper tear would look like, and I can tell them based on that pattern of where their field points and broadheads are hitting that I know what the paper would look like.
Mhm.
So it's basically they just gave me a paper tear, and I can tell them to move it this way and that way, and then adjust their sights so if they don't want to lose an arrow.
Mm.
And then they're usually better. But yeah, if you want to get the best bang for your buck in the shop and not have your shop owners just kick you out as soon as you can. Yeah, do your part, shoot the bow, shoot your broadheads, and figure it out. And May or June would be the best time.
Okay.
Hopefully you're shooting turkeys with a bow, and then you've already gotten your broadheads already screwed on in April.
Perfect. I love that. All right. Hot topic. Sights. Right? Is that where you're
Oh
gonna go
yeah.
to next?
Well, yeah. The only other accessory we didn't talk about was peep sights, and we don't got to get much into that. Quivers, go to a tight spot, you're gonna be fine. Now we can go down into sights. So um, I would say it's not as much of a hot topic as it is maybe bow to bow manufacturer, arrow to arrow manufacturer. But there's a whole bunch of different unique things that that people can choose for themselves, right? So you got your basic shooters that are never going to shoot tournament archery. They're not going to go to a Northwest Mountain Challenge. They're never going to shoot over 60 yards. Any kind of sight for them that has 5 pins is going to work out outstanding for those guys. But if you you're a shooter that maybe doesn't have an ethic, you're not shooting any further than 50 or 60 yards ethically hunting, but you also want to practice at 100 yards. You also want to go to the mountain shoots. You also want to, show off with your buddies and have a light knock challenge. You want to shoot some steel at 120, but you're not going to do that hunting. Then the only thing that you really can do is to get an adjustable sight. So, you know, I mostly sell spot hog and black gold here. And so, based on the needs and wants of those people, um, then I can kind of line them out as far as what they want to use and get them the right site.
Mm. Why do you say 5 pin?
Yeah, so there's one, there's threes, there's fives, there's sevens, and the single pin for me, um, and I'm going to speak out west. I mean, maybe where you're at, a single pin sounds amazing because you're going to be shooting ground blinds and out of ground blinds. Out west, single pin, I think that it really, really limits you. Uh, you're going to have to adjust your sight. You're not going to be seeing limbs. If it's a 40-yard shot, you don't know where those limbs are at above. Three's a little bit better. The benefit to going backwards, the single pin everybody loves because it's got great sight reference. You have no obstructions and you know exactly where you're at. It's like just aiming with a crosshair instead of 8 crosshairs. It's a lot easier to just aim with one.
Mm-hmm.
So the same thing goes as you go up in pins is the more references that you have, the busier that your sight picture is. But it does give you more opportunity to shoot different distances. So the reference I made for new shooters would be, let's say if you got a stick at 20 yards and an animal at 40, you draw back, you put your 40-yard pin on your bowl, and you're in a thick area. If you look up from your 30 to your 20 and you see a stick going through your 20-yard pin, you're going to hit that stick.
Mm.
You don't have that. You don't have that ability with a single pin sight. So 5 is mostly out here. It used to be the gold standard. Everybody had a 5 pin because you can either do a 20 to 60 or you can do a 30 to 70. And that fit pretty much all ethical shot distances, and that worked out great. I've always been I bounced around, but I like a lot of pins. I'm a 7 pin guy myself.
Mm.
And so I used to run 30 to 70, and I've had some 20-yard shots that killed animals but didn't go as well as I wanted to. And it's kind of hard to aim 3 inches under them in the moment. Force yourself to aim off. I can do it every time in the backyard. Under pressure, it's failed me a few times. And so, yeah, and some of these bowls come in tight, and a lot of my shots have been in that top pin range. But I run a 20 to 80 now, and I set my level at 90 to give myself an extra eighth reference when it comes to that. So, and I got a couple other cheats that I can do to give myself, some other
Interesting.
stuff. But
So
yeah,
you set me up with a 30 to 70 because I wanted an elk bow. I said I'm always going to
okay,
rifle hunt deer. This is when I lived out west. I'm going to rifle hunt deer and then I'm going to archery elk. And so you said, hey, run a 30 to 70 because um, the size of the animal at that
right.
distance, 3 inches. Um, I mean, you just said it does make a difference, but ultimately, it's still an ethical and killing shot. Now, you said if you're deer hunting, you would have recommended a 20 to 60. But with that being said, is I still have a 30 to 70 setup, and now I'm hunting out of a ground blind at a
Mm-hmm.
deer, which are smaller targets, especially these Texas deer, are not big bodied animals, um, and they duck, they jump the string a lot, and my shot could be at 10 yards. Talk me through these types of scenarios and what you'd recommend. Say a Midwest guy who wants his bow, he can only afford one, and wants to hunt whitetail majority of the time, but at the same time knows he's going to be taking elk trip out west every 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. So yeah, you definitely are running an elk setup, right? Like I've had the same problems with them deer jumping the strings, and it's really hard to go that low when you know they're going to duck. And I was talking blacktails jumping mine. I
Uh
don't
huh.
even know what the whitetails do. But yeah, so yeah, for you, I would either get a new sight or move your sight to 20 for sure if you're going to be shooting those guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, for everybody else, so that uh, I have two setups. I have my what I refer commonly to as my elk bow is it's my lever action 30-30. It's bulletproof, no moving parts. It's super simple. I have my backup bow is always a deer bow. I like to call it, but it's usually one of my older bows that is my next down bow that I set up specifically for shooting long range. And so I would say that my backup bow, if I had to pick one, that would be the setup that I would do. So what I run on my current one is a 5 pin Spot Hog Boonie, and it's got an adjustable sight. So I run my pins at 20 to 60 because uh, lately I am a believer in having 20-yard pins. Um, and if you're going to shoot a deer, you definitely do want a 20-yard pin. They're smaller animals, they duck, like you just said. I've had that happen out here. If you're going to shoot a turkey, good luck aiming 4 inches below the head or something like that, right? So,
Right.
uh, yeah. So a 20-yard pin is super important for pretty much everybody. If you're going to shoot tournaments, there's going to be a whole lot of shots at 10, 15 yards that you're going to want to be shooting a 20-yard top pin. You're going to have a better score and overall enjoy your experience more. But then you got your guy that's going to come out west, use this exact same setup, and he's going to come out here and he's going to shoot 100 yards maybe, or he's going to practice 100 yards. I would never say go shoot an elk at 100 yards. Um, but that'll give you that ability to go to these mountain challenges, these local shoots that they commonly have shots over 100 yards, backyard shooting competitions, like buddy competitions. You're going to want that 100 yard. One of the main ethical benefits of having another 100-yard sight, like you would in a 5 pin with a mover, where you use your bottom pin, slide it down, set it for 100, are follow up shots. And uh, everybody's going to wound something if they haven't already. And if you have pins that only go out to 60 yards and that elk is standing there bleeding sick and he's 80 yards away and you shoot under him because you don't know how to gap pins, um, that's unfortunate. And you could have bought us another sight for maybe another $100 more, and you would have had that movable sight option, and you can slide that thing right to him and finish that elk off. So, uh, just a good idea to cover all realms of any situation. In the do it all sight is definitely something that has a sight tape that can give you 100+ yard shooting.
Interesting. So, like a 5 pin slider is ideal for a whitetail hunter that wants to go out west and hunt elk or even mule deer at that point.
I would bet that they do a 3 pin, just so the sight picture's not so busy with the three instead of the 5 pins.
And they make a
But
3 pin slider.
that's probably the most common one that I sell,
Oh,
or at least it used to be. And then now people are going more into the five again, so kind of chasing trends around. But it's definitely shooter specific. When I shot my pins class back in the day, you'd have guys just tearing it up on the freestyle side that just hated shooting 5 pins when they hunted. I always felt like it was my wheelhouse. So doesn't mean that you're a good shot or bad shot. Some guys just don't like seeing all that busyness in their sight picture. And so if you just want to keep it very simple and see most of the terrain and animal, 3 pin sight's a very good way to go.
okay. Okay. Um, when it comes to, you're talking pins, you're talking sight picture, all that. Um, do glasses make a difference? Contacts of people being able to, vision for ethical shooting? I don't know. Obviously, this has to go with peep sights and a little bit of that, but
Hmm.
um, what do you see in regards to
Yeah.
that?
I'm definitely not an expert. Whenever we've had a question, mostly on the tournament archer side, I've always referred guys to Chuck Cooley. I used to own Feather Vision, and he was an optometrist, and he could just dial you in. But that was for the tournament archery side, where you got clarifiers and verifiers and all kinds of different things. But you use a clarifier that's in your peep, and a verifier and a lens on your sight. You know that you get fog and moist and all that stuff. But
Mhm.
keeping it simple on a hunting side, uh, I'm not a I can't say that I know exactly how that feels. I've got 2010 vision. But the biggest thing that I see with guys that have glasses is their anchor point has to change. They where I talk about 3 anchor points, knuckle underneath the earlobe, roughly, nose on the string, and then center your peep sight. If you use the tip of your nose on the bowstring, if you have glasses, most of the time the center piece of your glasses are going to be blocked there. So guys run their string a little bit more mid nose off to the left so that they've got a clearer picture. And that seems to be fairly common. On the tournament archery side, a guy named Shane Wills had glasses, and I swear he had no anchor point, but he would shoot perfect scores over and over and over again. So he figured it out. I don't know how he did it, but he was amazing. So yeah, I can't really speak a lot to that other than you just plan on having to adjust things from when you know, maybe had better vision. Your anchor points are going to change. Your nose position is going to change a little bit.
Gotcha. One question that I found out the hard way in Texas is understanding, especially when you're hunting out of a ground blind where daylight is still huntable, but your
Mhm.
vision that your fiber optics are picking up isn't glowing. And quickly I learned that in the state of Texas, you can have a light, artificial light that you can screw into your
Mhm.
sight. State of Washington, having any electronics on a bow is illegal. So, do
Yep.
do all sites come with that ability, or is there, um, or is that just a standard thing? Like, hey, this is a car, so it drives and has four wheels, versus this is a site, an archery site, and it has that threading for any light to screw in.
Any quality site's going to have good fiber optic. They're going to have enough fiber wrapped up in there with a with the fiber optics that are going to be in a transparent, clear piece that's going to glow everything very well. But if you use the ground blind example where you're shooting from a dark into a light, I don't care how bright your sights are and how much um, fiber optic you have, you're not going to be able to see your pins. They're going to be black. Like my elk was that this year. I couldn't see my pins, and I didn't shoot them out of blind, but I was in a very dark area shooting into a small opening. But I wish we could use them in Washington, but we can't. And it's the same thing that you're talking about is you draw back and they're black. And so pretty all the spot hogs, all the black golds, they have that little um, threaded portion where you can screw in a sight light. Um, I do have sight lights, but I have only used them to sight in the dark if I needed to just check if maybe I had a big fall and I'm hunting dark to dark and I'm not going to shoot my boater in the daylight. I'll keep one in the truck, but it's never going to be attached to my bow. But I have taken some shots in the headlights at 20 yards just to make sure I didn't royally screw something up that I'd be having an issue the next morning. But
Gotcha.
yeah, we can't hunt with them, but all the sites they have that option.
Okay. So you're talking base choosing off of the pins, all that, the types of sites. Is there a price point difference? Like more pins equals a higher price, or a sliding site equals a higher price, or what is the breakdown of that?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So if you're going to buy uh, let's just use a spot hog grinder as an example. 5 pins going to be 210. A 7 pin's going to be 230. They're going to be $10 more per pin for spot hog. You're always going to see a price increase with any of these manufacturers, but you will spend more money on a movable site than you will a basic fixed one. Um, so there's just more moving parts, more machining, and everything that goes into it. So you will expect to uh, spend more. Like a basic 5 pin might be a black gold rush for $140. You grab that same mountain light one, it's probably gonna be $320, just for the movable characteristics that you have into it.
And so when you combine the release and the sight and the rest and the bow and that, this is where you're like, well, is your budget $1,000 or is your budget $3,000? Because that is where the giant jump is. It's like you could have, the nicest carbon bow, but then you're throwing a whisker biscuit on it with a non-movable, 2-pin, 3-pin sight. Um, like there are ways to go budget, but that's like putting uh, that's just some things are just not meant to go together, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. If you have a set budget and you're gonna choose, I want best bow or I want best accessories, I would get an average bow with great accessories.
That is a great answer right there. That's really good to know for people. Um, what is an average bow with great accessories typically cost right now, at least?
Right. All right. So real quick, so you're at like 150 on the side or on the rest. If you're talking good accessories, 150 stabilizer, another 100, so you're at 250. You're at $300. You can do the math. So 450, $200 for yeah, quivers, $200. So yeah, I mean you're gonna spend two, five,
6, 7.
7, 9. It's not unreasonable to say you're going to spend $1,000 in quality accessories,
Yeah.
and your accessories are probably going to cost more than your bow if you have, like a $600, $700 bow.
Okay. And then that doesn't count the
Yeah.
arrows that you're going to blow through learning how to shoot your bow, or like
Right.
dialing that in.
Right.
And
Right. Yeah. So for that person on a budget, that they're probably going to get. I sell almost all the brands here. I primarily sell Black Eagle. So that would be a Black Eagle Outlaw that I've taken them out back and shot them at 40 yards in the same hole over and over and over again, just to check and see, kind of doing essentially a Hooter shooter test, but while I'm shooting it, and they still shoot great. I mean, they're a great arrow. I think they're 5,000 straightness, and their price point is going to be, after I fletch and custom wise, they're probably going to be 120 bucks, $130 a dozen, and or you can go up and get $300 dozen arrows. So I would put people into a lower end Black Eagle Outlaw that are on a budget
okay.
until they shoot well enough. And yeah.
Okay. So that's good. We talked
Oh, you
about,
got the old red still?
so we're going to talk about arrow setup now
Oh
here.
no.
Okay, so we covered the bow, and that's important. But everyone who shoots a rifle knows that the bullet really makes a difference on the expansion and how it holds together and energy transfer and all that. Well, same thing goes with arrows and accuracy and all that. So back when I got set up with you, you and I, once again, listeners, this was for an elk setup, and this was a Maxima Red 350 spine, which I still don't understand what the spine truly means. So please, like, go over that. And I was put with 125 grain field points and broadheads. So take us through arrows and arrow setups in the quickest way possible, because I know this is a whole podcast to itself.
Oh yeah.
To
Yeah, you had a great arrow back in the day. They're not great anymore. So they're no longer really around. So when it comes to arrow setups, price point's huge, right? But arrows are a point where you get what you pay for. And so where I'm after, if we're going to go as short as we can, if you're going to, let's go elk setup, the minimum that I'd like to see people shooting elk at is about 440 grains. In Washington State, you're allowed 420 if you're shooting a 70-pound bow. FOC, I'm not caring about. Mass weight, I care about. That's always going to go hand in hand with how fast your bow is shooting. The best flying speed that I've found is anywhere between 280 feet per second and 290 feet per second with a fixed bladed broadhead. So I will weigh arrows, chronograph them, and kind of figure out that sweet spot for people. But we can really, really overthink this as an industry about all the extremes about front of center, mass weight, and all the junk that's kind of worked its way into this. Um, so keep it between 400 40 grains to 500 grains, keep it between 280 and 290 feet per second, and you're going to have a very lethal elk killing setup.
Okay. And then is that the same for deer, or is it one arrow
Yeah.
rule them all type
So,
thing?
well, obviously, if you have an elk setup that you trust and can just and and drive tacks with, it's going to be fine on a deer. There's nothing wrong with overkilling something. But when it comes to deer, some people want a flatter shooting trajectory arrow. They don't want to, they they want a tight pin gap that if they misjudge something or a deer jumps the string a little bit, the arrow's flying a little bit faster, so there's a little bit more yardage forgiveness when it comes to that, which has saved me a few times when I was chasing speed back in the day on elk. Um, at the end of the day, though, yeah, that's great for 50 yards and under, but I believe that that same 280 foot per second arrow is going to fly way better at distance and carry a greater group than you are if you're going to be shooting 330 feet per second. So, um, not saying that it can't be done, but you better have perfect form, perfect bow. The temperatures didn't change things. Your strings didn't stretch. You didn't torque. Your stone cold under pressure where you can center everything up. But uh, I still, even with my deer bow, the only difference I do is I just make a sight that goes further distance than my elk bow. But I try to keep the same setup.
Okay. I know a lot of whitetail people out here shoot 100 grain heads. And
Yeah,
you set me up with 125s because this was an elk setup. Would you have
right.
put me in 100 grain if I said, "Hey, I'm going to be hunting deer and elk occasionally"?
Let me ask you this: are they trying to shoot over 300 feet per second with their deer setups out there?
Okay, I'm going to use my buddy down here as an example.
Uh huh. Yeah.
He I don't even think he's chronoed his bow. I mean, maybe at one day it was like a bow handed to him from his dad, and he's gone out
Uh
back and he
huh.
shot it accurately, and it has 100 grain field points on it, and he's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and that is kind of the I go to Cabela's, I grab a bow off the shelf, kind of purchaser, right? It's um,
Right.
I don't know. Does
Right.
that answer your question? Is
It goes hand in hand, right? So, what is speed of sound? 1,100 feet per second,
yep.
and you're shooting a 300 feet per second bow. If you're shooting really fast, that animal still has four times the 4-to-1 ratio is to jump the string. So, Are you are you doing better by shooting 320 feet per second, but a bow's loud and they can hear it go off?
Mm,
Or are you better off by shooting a really heavy arrow that goes thud instead of whack? And then they're going to sit there and they're going to take the arrow.
yeah.
Those whitetails, they probably don't care. If they're inside 50 yards, they're probably ducking and moving and almost all the way out of the way of the arrow if they can either see you when you draw or shoot
Yep.
and they hear the report of the bow.
Yeah.
So yeah. So would I set you up that way? I don't know. So you're kind of gifted because you have long arms and strength and everything. So you don't have to cut any corners, right? Like
Hmm.
where I'm a short, stocky build, I have to kind of cut some corners, draw some more extra weight. Um, the You're always an easier solution because you have everything that you want when it comes to archery. You got speed and draw length, and you have the energy, and now you can just shoot whatever's comfortable to you. So if I was going to set you up now, I would still, my personal bias, I would say if you're going to try to still shoot long distance at some point, because I know that you're going to hunt elk at some point, right?
Yep.
I would say that I wouldn't want to set you up with a deer arrow and an elk arrow, but I would say that maybe your older stealth turns into a deer bow, or the older one turns into an elk bow. I don't know. You could decide that
Yeah.
because it's backup bow thing. But um, I don't think that I have a strong opinion one way or the other, but I would still be trying to keep to those same fundamental principles of just shoot about a 290 foot per second arrow, and it's going to blow right through that animal if you hit them where you're supposed to. So
Small diameter versus regular diameter. I mean,
yeah,
is
so
smaller better,
yeah,
less is more concept?
so I shoot a Black Eagle Spartan. It's a 244 size where the rampages are smaller, and they're a 204 diameter. The benefits to a small arrow would be that you get less wind drift, arguably a little bit more penetration, and so that would be the conversation with that. I don't personally shoot, and I used to do a little mule deer hunting where I was going out in the open and shooting some long distances. For that one, yeah, I would definitely set up a like a Black Eagle Rampage, which is a smaller diameter arrow, and I try to get that arrow weight up as high as I possibly could just to avoid any wind drift. Because when I'm thinking about the wind's going to push the arrow, you're thinking about mass weight. The higher the mass weight, the less wind drift. You're thinking about diameter. Smaller the diameter, the less wind drift.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to shoot a setup like that. There's no big wind in the elk woods. So I feel like you can shoot, you're going to shoot a bigger knock when you're shooting a larger diameter arrow. And so you get a little more meat on that knock, and then you're going to shoot a more dependable knock. Those small diameter, okay, so I've only hit two of them. There's an even smaller one, the 166 sized arrows, which are basically like a pencil, if not smaller.
Mm.
People do hunt with those because they want the no wind drift, the mass penetration, and everything. But there's so little meat onto that knock that I don't feel like you're getting enough material in there to be strong.
Yeah.
And I've seen that over and over again. And so I don't want, I'm not willing to sacrifice strength and durability over those little marginal things about diameter. Most of my arrows, they blow all the way through my elk, and I don't have an issue with penetration whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm only 5 foot. I'm 5'8", maybe a little less. But
as you get older, you get shorter. I get it.
Yeah, right. So yeah, so setup to setup, yeah. I have considered on my deer bow to set up some rampages for long distance for those very same reasons. But for elk, I'm going to shoot a Black Eagle Spartan.
Gotcha. Okay. Um,
Yeah.
why did you say that my arrows that you set me up with back in 2018 were great and now they're not?
The Carbon Express brand was a front runner back in those days. So I think it was in 2006 or 7 that I won my first national championship. And when I did, Carbon Express came up to me and offered me a contract to shoot for them. They used to have the Nano Pros and the Maximas and the Reds and all those arrows, and they were trying their very best to be. And they're made in Korea, and they were, if anybody knows anything about Korean archers, they're some of the best in the world. The attention to details there, they were a very, very, very good arrow, and that they sold multiple times. Quality suffered, the tolerances suffered, and that same old Maxima Red or Maxima or the Nano Pro or any of those arrows that were around then, the quality has not stuck around. So it became a for profit instead of for quality. And next thing you know, nobody wants them, so it kind of backfired on them. Now you really don't see Carbon Express in the game anywhere anymore. But back in the day when you got yours, they were good arrows.
Interesting. Okay, so um,
Yep.
I have a bunch of arrows that I purchased to make sure that I stayed consistent. Um, I'm gonna have to shoot them this spring once it is light enough for me to shoot after work, and really check my accuracy on them, because you're saying the quality control's gone down so that um, it's like a match bullet versus general Remington core lock off the shelf bullet. Um, your
I
groups
would
are
say it's more like you're grabbing a pocket full of 7mm ammo that they're mix and match, and that's probably what I would say that the quality level is nowadays.
okay.
I would say sell those to your buddy that you don't like very much, and I'll send you down some Spartans.
Well, if I got a buddy that I sell some stuff that I don't like very much, I'm not going to be selling him many things. So I'll have to,
Right.
do some thinking on this.
Jackrabbits, right? You got jackrabbits?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, that's your jackrabbit arrow.
Okay, deal. Good to know. I do know that they've been breaking a whole lot more lately. I shot
Okay.
um, Well, I had shot my first archery buck this year, and the first
Yep.
arrow broke off when the deer fell on the arrow, and then I put a second arrow in it, and it passed through. And I went and found my arrow, and it ended up being snapped off. And I was like, man, it just skimmed across the ground, and it was broken. That didn't make a whole lot of sense
Hmm.
to me. But that it has a lot to do with the quality control. Then is what you're saying.
I was talking more about spine and consistency with spine,
Uh huh.
weight, weight consistencies. They're going to group or they're not going to group. You can knock tune them to get them drove all together or not. The braking, that's been around a long time. People used to say that the aluminum wouldn't break, the um, the Easton ones. I'm drawing a big blank right now. They won't break because they're carbon and aluminum, right? But an arrow's going to break. I mean, if a deer locks its shoulder blades back on an arrow, I don't care what arrow you have, it's going to break.
Hmm.
Gold tip's one of the strongest ones out there. They're going to break. I've broke plenty of arrows on animals and that were perfect kill shots. There's just a whole lot of movement with that arrow when it hits, and it's got energy going this way and that way. And you shoot something hard in a target, you think the tips can be broken. You look at the back end of the knock, and the back end where the knock sits is cracked, and the knock won't go in there. It just shows you how much energy goes from one end to the arrow to the next. And so I don't think that maybe that Carbon Express breaking any more than any other one that's going to break,
Hmm.
but the Carbon Express just has some. I don't even know if you sell if anybody can find those anymore. I don't see them on the market. But they're not a favorite arrow anymore, but they used to be my favorite.
Interesting, fascinating.
Yeah.
And that just goes to show how things change over time. And I know when I bought my first bow and I dropped thousands of dollars on my setup, and I look over and I see guys being like, "Well, this was last year's bow, but I'm buying a new bow this coming year," and they just keep playing that game. Does a lot of it have to do with stuff, chasing things, getting better, and always making sure that you have the best because things outdate or change over time, or you know, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yep. Some people want the latest greatest thing no matter what, right? And so I don't always do that, but I carried my Mach 1 for a long time. The I would say just using the carbon PSEs. It started with that. The first one had a like uh, the little truss style design. You couldn't shoot a four. You couldn't shoot a four bladed. I'm sharp. You couldn't shoot a four fletched arrow out of it because it had a piece that moved on the cable guard. It rotated into the way, and so it was also not high enough. So then you go to the stealth, like the one that you had, and you actually could shoot a four fletch arrow. And some setups really like a four fletch arrow. I personally love four fletch arrows for hunting. And so that one was a no brainer. We should go get the one that you had. And then the next one was the Mach 1, which was better than yours. Mostly the grip. You have, uh, this would be an extreme example, but you have a blocky riser. It feels like you're touching a 2x4 when you're shooting, where the Mach 1 was more rounded, slender, it was lighter overall, and it tuned a little bit better. Like your cam maybe need some shimming, a lot of shimming with yours,
Yep.
runs the risks of derailing that model if you have to shoot the arrow straight down the center of the riser and you want to move your shims back and forth on your cams to get it right. That sweet spot is almost a derail on yours. The Mach 1 wasn't like that, so that was a slight improvement. So those all made good sense to change some things out. And then within that Mach 1, then they changed the cams to the EC2 cam, and then they built the 220 system, which is a super easy way to tune bows. And so I was so tired of chasing washers on my floor and knocking those down when a bow wouldn't tune.
Right.
And that was actually the reason I picked up Bowtech in my shop, was because they had that system there. We could drive the cam back and forth on screw sets. So nice. I mean, I was going to make a hard switch, and then They came out with their 220 system, which is awesome for tuning bows, and it takes me 10 seconds instead of the potential to blow up a bow in a bow press and drop things everywhere, right?
Mhm.
So, and like I said earlier in the podcast, was if it makes my life easier in here on tuning, it's going to make for a better uh, experience for you in the field.
Mm.
And so then, if you got those cams that had the 220 system, absolutely buy the new one. And then last year, in the most recent, they did they had the Mach 30 last year, and they had the Mach 34 last year. Like the geometry of the Mach 34, the Mach 30 was a dream to shoot. It was a better bow than the Mach 34. Still had the nice tuning that we could do and everything, but uh, I was going to do a 30, and then I caught something through the loops that there was going to be a Mach 33 out. So I just held on to my old one, and this year I got the Mach 33. So, but yeah, no, I just using those as an example. Every year, PSE has come out with something that's either easier on the dealer and the mechanic, which has been better for the shooter. And I would say that it's not wrong to buy the next one up every year from PSE because there's very good reasons why you would. There's some manufacturers I don't understand why you'd buy a new one because you look at it, it changed nothing, it did nothing, and the speed didn't change, the tuning didn't change. All you did it maybe was just because you wanted the latest and greatest. And so um, you got to have a reason that you're going to want to do it, but it's your money. You can do whatever you want.
Right.
And if you want to get the brand new latest and greatest, you're up to you.
Let me talk about a question that hit me this year is hunting out of a ground blind. And I believe this is a 33 axle to axle, maybe a 34, this original one that I have. And I realized being 6'1", I'm not extremely tall, but I'm taller than the average male. And in a ground blind, I'm already sitting really high in a
Right.
chair or on a bucket or whatever you're using to sit on. um, I did notice that I have to constantly run the risk and be aware of where my cams are because I don't want to make noise and hit something, especially at full draw or whatever. So I was like, oh, I want to go to a 30-inch axle to axle because I'm hunting out of a ground blind. Is that a good reason to buy a 30-inch axle to axle bow, or do you go with the bow that just shoots the best?
Right. So there's two ways to look at it, right? And back to when I'm asking questions, what bow do you want? What kind of hunting are you doing? Backcountry, open, whatever the case is. Traditionally, a longer axle bow is a little bit more forgiving, easier string angle. It's not so steep, they're going to be more like this versus like that. And they're going to fit the face ergonomics just a little bit better. And you're going to be able to comfortably shoot that bow better. Longer distance for sure. Deep sights can be closer to the eye. You're going to have better accuracy. But like in your case, you're shooting short distances and these, and with a little bit of tweaks about what you might want to do, that 30 is going to be uh, perfect for guys like yourself, tree stand hunters. That's why PSC came out with them, was to cater to more of the East Coast crowd when they came up with the Mach 30. Where now they're doing the 33 and 35s for more of the West Coast crowd. But for a guy like you, absolutely, that would be the right bow. Um, you're not going to be shooting far, but if you ever wanted to, I personally shot some of these Mach 30s, and I have to be a little bit, a little bit more careful about my anchor points, my alignment, and setting my peep exactly right. But even if I make a small error, it doesn't punish me very much. But I have to be just that much more particular on my anchor points and my setup, and then it's a dream to shoot the Mach 30.
Hmm.
And
So,
it's incredible though.
so knowing that I want my bow to be a multi-animal Midwest whitetail, out west elk bow, would it
Hmm.
just then make more sense for me to suck it up and have an extra 3 inches and go with like a 33 that they came out with for 2025? Or do I sacrifice the, making sure my anchor points are exactly right and all that for the
Yeah.
shorter
Uh,
bow? Does that make a difference?
well, one of the biggest things that we got to think about before that is what your draw length is.
Okay.
So, do you know what your draw length is?
Yeah, like 30 and a half or 31.
Are you?
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm on the
because
longer side.
the Mach 30 DS tops out with an EC2 cam at 30 inches.
Mm,
My rep told me that if we bought an E2 cam that we can get it to 31. So if we're gonna really get into the weeds about which bow we want for you, I'll have you draw that thing back on. I'll show you what to do off camera about what to do, measure it out exactly. And if
yeah.
you're at 30, then you can have an EC2 cam and you can have a Mach 30 DS. And that bow, what scared me initially because it's 30 inches, it's not going to shoot well. But as soon as I got a customer's Mach 30 in here and I got one, I wanted one right away.
Mm,
It was amazing. It does not shoot like a 30 inch. The string angle's even better because the cams are big and it feels like a dream on the face. The only thing is you're going to want a short D loop. You're going to want to make sure that your release is the right length and not long, nice and short. That way it helps pull everything into position the way that is correct for shooting. But if you can fit into a 30, the DS is great. If we can actually do the E2 cam for you and it goes to 31, and I'll figure that out for you, then I would still say, yeah, absolutely run the 30 because you're not losing anything from the 30 to the 33. I'm never going to shoot out of a brown blind. I'm going to run the 33 myself.
interesting. Man,
Yeah.
so and this is exactly why all you listeners go to an archery shop and go talk to somebody who actually knows archery rather than just going to a shop where it's a guy who got assigned to the archery department. It makes a difference because of this conversation right here. Um, I can only imagine, Matt, how many times you've had people walk in your shop and be like, "Oh, well, the guy at Sportsman's Warehouse or the guy at Shields or whatever, like, yeah, they told me just get this, bada bing, bada boom," and you're like, "Well, I'm watching you shoot, and this is what you need."
hmm Yeah. I think that the word's gotten out enough now that the box stores are not the experts. And then the manufacturers have also followed suit. They don't give the Pro Series bows to those stores anymore
Hmm.
for very good reason. So, yeah, I mean, whatever your local shop is the one that you should go to, and you hope that you have a qualified tech and owner there. And most of them in my area are. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, you definitely want to be at a bow shop instead of anything else. The biggest problem I have nowadays with disputing knowledge is YouTube though, because there's in podcasts, but YouTube. But there's so many opinions out there, and I cringe at the level of passion that these people have for what they think is right, and then they change their mind a lot, and then they still think that they have it right, and then I've got to deflect that nonstop about this is what this guy said. Okay, so there's a lot of ways to skin a cat that they're not wrong, but there's some extreme examples of don't listen to that guy.
Yeah.
Just trust your bow shop guy.
Yeah, there you go.
So
Well, trust
yeah,
your bow
yeah,
shop guy because when something goes wrong, you're going to be going back to your bow shop and they're going to be able to address the issue easier. And if they know your stuff all the way, um,
right.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
Man, look who just
yeah.
joined.
Hope they have that relationship.
Look who just joined the live down
Who
there.
that?
Randy Newberg. Dude, shout out to
Randy
Rand.
Newberg.
Shout out to Randy Newberg.
Oh, Randy.
Oh man,
Appreciate everything Randy's done for us.
dude, he's phenomenal. He made a great guest. His story is powerful. All you listeners, if you've never listened to the podcast I did with Randy, go check it out. It's a good one. Getting back on the archery topic, so we covered arrows, all that. Last thing, broadheads. Um, it, fixed versus mechanical versus. I mean, does it make a difference? Is it more just preference? Like, everything's marketing nowadays, right? So, how many opportunities do you actually have to see what that broadhead does on an animal? I mean, I've put out a YouTube video comparing 4 different broadheads, gets, you know, tons of views, And then people are like, "Oh, dude, that broadhead was no good," or everything's just opinion. Very, very few have perspectives because broadheads are expensive. What's your take, real quick?
Yeah, that's probably the one that everybody has an opinion about, right?
Hmm.
Uh, so just addressing mechanicals for a second. It, the thought is that they fix tuning issues and then it's all great, but they don't. I mean, they don't always impact in the exact same place that a untuned bow would put them. Yeah, it gets closer. It's not magnified as much, but they don't they don't hit in the exact same spot as your build points all the time if your bow's way out of tune. Um, when you're talking about mechanicals for elk, I'm a believer that they that a mechanical really should not be used for an elk. I've had a few. Well, I've had lots of stories in the bow shop, but I've had issues on deer and turkeys with penetration, and I've had openings early. And back to my philosophy of just keeping everything lever action 30-30 dependable. I don't want moving parts, and that goes with my broadheads as well.
Mm.
If you know how to tune a bow, great, and you get an accurate bow and a good shooter that doesn't have really compromised form, then you should be able to shoot a fixed blade broadhead accurately, honestly, as far as that you're able to. I can shoot my Q80 Exodus broadheads out to 120 yards, and they shoot amazing. I'm not saying that you screw them on, go out there, and you're done. There are some little tunes that you got to do to make sure that they're perfect. But that's a sharp broadhead, tough broadhead, accurate broadhead, consistent broadhead. And so I'm a big believer in a large cutting fixed blade broadhead. Now, there's also the back to referencing the female archers, the youth archers that just can't pull anything more than 40 pounds. Their draw length's 22 inches. That QAD Exodus may not be the best broadhead for them because when a broadhead hits skin and bone, it takes a lot of energy to push through into the vitals. If you have a cut on contact style broadhead, then it's going to reduce that, and you're going to get, I mean, just you're going to get 40-pound bows with 22 inches of draw blowing through an elk at 40 yards,
Hmm.
full pass through. You're going to go find your arrow somewhere. So for that one, the Kudus have gotten a little bit of a bad rap with their single bevel and the lack of sharpness, but there's good ways to sharpen them if you want to spend a little extra time to get them right. But I've never had a problem with a kudu with the bleeders, whether it's been blood trail, recovery, distance, or anything like that. That's still a very good broadhead for me.
Hmm.
So when I have those kind of shooters, I'm going to put them into a kudu broadhead, cut on contact with a bleeders, specifically bleeders, not just the two blade, because there's not enough blood trail with those. The bleeders really dramatically help the wound channel, and you get
Hmm.
more blood on the ground. And you don't compromise accuracy, and you don't compromise penetration with those.
Yeah.
So that's where I'd steer them. The only place that I feel that mechanicals belong, an adult on a turkey, I wouldn't put a youth on a mechanical on a turkey. They have armor for feathers. Both of my kids have shot them, and they don't get penetration. And and you would have thought that you should have, but their turkeys are incredible. So if you're an adult and you're going to shoot a mechanical into a turkey, awesome. I think that's great. Questionable on deer. I'm still not a big believer in that myself, but I think that when they work really, really well.
Hmm.
But uh, but yeah. So, but if you have somebody who has terrible form, won't buy the right accessories or bow to get a bow shooting well, and there is just no hope for this person when it comes to shooting a good shot consistently, and then you throw a fixed blade broadhead on the end of their arrow, and then you're asking them to shoot this even better so it shoots good, and they don't, they're going to shoot worse. That's when somebody should probably get into a mechanical broadhead, and that's kind of a last resort sort of deal. So
Gotcha. Okay. Um,
yeah,
Anything that I didn't ask that you feel like needs to be addressed? Because we covered quite a
man,
bit.
you
This is
covered.
a long podcast, but very
Yeah,
in
dude.
depth.
I thought that we were going to talk about your new bow, and that was it. So you're hitting me with a whole bunch tonight. So I think that I don't know if I could expand on anything.
Perfect.
So I see a couple comments. Guys want me to tell them where I shot my elk this year. I'm gonna refuse to answer that one as well. But no, I think I think we've covered a whole bunch. I would just say, yeah, hit up your local archery shop sooner than later. Everybody funnels in the summer months. Definitely use those spring months and those winter months to get out here, shoot some indoor archery leagues, shoot the local 3D shoots, shoot your Northwest Mountain challenges. No
Mhm.
matter what you do, just get out there with your bow early and just get familiar with it sooner than later
Yeah.
because you can get away with it a little bit in guns, a little bit depending on what you're doing. I know that goes, you know, that the guys that are shooting a lot with guns, long distances, different elevations, they have to do their homework.
Right.
But when it comes to archery, you really got to get your muscles dialed and everything, and then that's when you're going to find out that you have strings that need replaced. You're going to have arrows that are messed up, and maybe a cracked limb on a bow. And so get it out sooner and later. Uh, don't delay on things, and just have some fun. Get out there. You go to your local club that has a walkthrough, and spend some time with your wife, family, and your friends, and just go have a great time
Yeah. That's
sooner than
awesome.
later. Yeah.
That's awesome. Matt, thank you, brother, for joining me for a podcast. We're gonna wrap up the podcast, and then we'll stay on in case anyone has questions that they didn't want to ask while we're recording live here. But listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the podcast. I hope that you feel knowledgeable enough now to go out and make your purchases and get into the archery game. You will never regret shooting a bow and arrow. It is one of the coolest experiences I've ever had, and created some of the best memories, such as this elk on the wall back behind me. Um, it's one of the things that you always look back and you're like, dude, that was one of the most incredible times. Whether it's shooting in the backyards with your kids or shooting competition with a buddy or whatever it is one of the most rewarding things that you can do, and you don't have to go to a gun range to do it or find a place that's legal to shoot a gun. You can go shoot a bow all over the place. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the podcast. Be blessed. Remember that life is happening for you. It's not happening to you. We're not playing victim here. And that mentorship is conservation. You can never outgive good. I'm Johnny Mack and Matt Schmitz for Inferno Archery. Be blessed. Freedom on. And as always, stay soulful. If you enjoyed today's podcast and want to support the show, you can always like, share, subscribe, and leave a rating, as it helps us share our mission of mentorship is conservation. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of Soul Seekers Nation as we transform lives through primal adventure.